Welcome all to another week of Energy Gist webinar. Our topic is navigating the transition. Insights from industry leaders on shifting to renewable energy. Doing justice to this will be our awesome and wonderful guest, Chigozie Nweke Eze, who is the founder of Integrated Africa Power, IAP. Chigozie Nweke Eze is an economist and geographer working on planning, financing, policies, and politics of energy and infrastructures in Africa. His work has involved engagement with diverse stakeholders in public and private sector, playing at international and nation levels. We're excited to have you tune in for this topic. Do you have an amazing session?
Does commence, we can just take it from there. But I would love to jump into the conversation with you, Chigozie, and to just welcome everyone else. So hello everyone, my name is Obalamni and I'll be the moderator for today's topic. Today we have with us our guest Chigozie, and that I'm so excited to have with us. Today really our topic is going to be focusing on navigating the transition. So we want to find out just more insights with you regarding the shift to renewable energy. There's a lot of conversation within Africa and just the rest of the globe. There's really a debate around this conversation of how do we make this transition just for each and every one. So Chigozie, I would love you to just do an introduction for yourself to our lovely audience and just invite them.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Baba, how is South Africa today?
It's great, actually. I'm very excited. I'm actually at the Africa Energy in Daba right now, trying to sneak away and find a good room. But South Africa's great. It's just cold where because everyone has the air cons on, but South Africa, yeah, the weather's great. And yourself?
Yeah, everything is fine here as well. So yeah, I think this is a very good discussion. In fact, I joined the discussion because I think that I think energy gist with gist that I believe that is going to be a frank discussion. More of a conversation as opposed to a presentation with all the formalities. So I'm going to try to be as simple as possible, so that I think we need to get to that stage, when we are having really frank conversations among ourselves as Africans regarding really pertinent issues in African energy sector, and also conversing in such a way that people who are not necessarily energy experts can also follow. Because at the end of the day, energy itself, it encompasses so many other areas, like agriculture, education, health sector, and all these neighboring stakeholders or sectors cross-cutting needs to be able to join that conversation. So I think I'm happy, and I think that's also what we're gathered here. So I'm going to be in a very conversational mood. Yeah, yeah. So that is very nice. I'm happy to be here, and I also welcome others who are listening.
Thank you so much, Chigozie. And you're right. You're absolutely right. What we're really trying to do at Energy Gist is to further the conversations, right? But it's also how can we make the energy conversations as accessible to the everyday person? And what I truly believe is as much as we have private institutions and public institutions that are doing the best that they can to help with their transition, but the civilians, the people on the grassroots are just as equally important in this discussion that we're having about how can we transition, because they are really the people that get affected by the different policies that are done, or the different technologies that are taken on, right? The everyday person gets affected. But let me just jump straight into it. To just also go into this conversation, how did you find yourself in this space? How did you find yourself in this space, and why also do you find yourself gravitating towards solving issues within this particular sector?
Yeah, of course. For me, I grew up in Africa at a time when you used to have constant electricity in South Africa. I was actually growing up in Nigeria, where we did not necessarily have constant electricity. And, and so, of course, I saw the broader effects of this in terms of touching other areas, right? So then things. I saw how it kind of, affected even as far back as even education sector, because whether you will do your homework in the night depends on where there's light, right? Or your assignments, school assignments. The comfort of also having this electricity at your home, that's at household level now. Business level, to the extent to which there was security light could determine what could happen on the street. So some people could close their shop as early as 5 p.m. because it's about to get dark. And other people would say, because there's security light, well, let's leave it open till 7 p.m. also. So business-wise, production of goods and services, processing, all these things depended on sufficient energy availability. And so of course it piqued my interest. I mean, first of all, how do you improve all of these things, right? And then I got right, and it happens to be that this is a sector that requires interdisciplinary approach or prowess, right? So I was well suited. So of course, the energy sector is not a sector whereby we are saying, okay, fine, although only those who study this and that can enter. I think there's space for everyone, including media people, to actually come in. We need everyone. We need people from different sectors. We need, because it has so many aspects. It has clean cooking as well. We need everybody. We need everything involved, and then we also need to have establish more gender mixture in the different where we have been campaigning and supporting different people from both genders to help them to get into the sector as well.
Absolutely. I think you touched on something that's quite pivotal, really, that energy, energy security is really the backbone of any development. When we think about development or we just think about advancement, we need to take energy into consideration. And I've had so many conversations that have shown us actually that when energy, because it touches on every different aspect. It touches on the finances, it touches on the socioeconomic standards that really people are able to have. It touches on education and energy literacy. One of the things that I really wanted to understand is, if we are then understanding that energy is pivotal to where we are heading or where we are attempting to head, what are the limitations that we've seen from where we as Africans right now are trying to have been going about giving ourselves energy security and transitioning now into the renewable space that we're trying to move into? What has the limitations been looking like, particularly with the background that we do have and the different ways initially that we used to secure our energy?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. One of the things that everyone knows, one of the backgrounds has been investment and financing, but at the same time, there has been a lot of innovations to cushion that, right? So it now comes for me, as far as I'm concerned, that we need to be more serious about telling a larger story concerning the energy sector. So it's not just about light comes. We need to be able to go a little bit further to tell the story of the impacts that it can make and where it can go. So it's one thing to tell someone, we are building a solar project here, just invest in it. And another thing of telling the fuller story of saying, what, we're going to build a 1 megawatt solar project to this community, and it's going to have an impact in the health sector. It's going to reduce mortality rate from 50% to 10%. School is going to increase the number of students that goes to school because the part of the electricity will be used to pump water. So we have more girls going to school. So it's going to improve businesses in terms of agriculture. So telling the full story is important, so that the investor knows the full scale of what he's getting into. In fact, as we're speaking, we are actually building a 2 megawatts project in Southeast Nigeria, where we are also practicing what we are preaching. You see, and we hope
Absolutely.
people get it. Yeah, so we're involved in so many areas. We've advised so many people in different sectors, and we're doing these projects also by ourselves. And these are the lessons that we're actually picking up from it. So it's important. You know, I think that financing and investment has been sung a lot as a song, but we want to deviate a little bit away from it to begin to look at other challenges. I mean, how well are we communicating with all the stakeholders involved? For instance, are we really having a good conversation, cross-sectoral conversation, cross-level conversation? Do we know what is needed on the ground? Do we avoid one cap fits all trap? You know, trying to know, okay, what really works for this particular case does not have to work for another case. And then once we get that done, then we are clearing the road for now welcoming more investors to come in, and then finance naturally flows in.
I love that. I love that because essentially what you're saying is if we can understand what the actual problem is and we can communicate how we believe our solution will be able to solve that problem, then we will have people that are investing, or we won't have a problem with people really investing in the solution because we've proven to show how this can help. I really love that because a lot of what Africa has suffered from is the single story or the single narrative, that has continued to be perpetuated about us and about our communities. How do you feel about the renewable technologies that we bring on as solutions coming into these African communities, and oftentimes coming in not to scope, not to understand what the people on the grassroots level need, but come to just apply? What are some of the things that you have learned as well? Um, Upon doing so many renewable projects within these communities, what do they actually need, um, coupled with the solutions that we are providing?
That's good. So of course, it depends on where you play in. If you play in urban areas, they know what light is and electricity is, and so they need it for a lot of things, including household. So you are trying to serve middle class and high class people, right? And the urban areas, and they need it for cooking. They need to have more light for television at night. So these are a different group of people, right? So they may need more electricity for business and for more comfort. If you go to the rural areas, the people there are having slightly different priorities. So of course, in terms of, perhaps you go to a community maybe where there are pastoralists, for instance, and you tell them that, want to bring them light so that they can be able to have light, electricity in the night. They would question that narrative. We move from one place to another. We don't really start home all the time. What are you bringing light for us to do? we have an experience. So, that's what I'm saying, that contextual wise, you have to also ask yourself, who really needs what? And then they may just say, what we really need? We need water. So that we do not have to go all that far to look for water. We can stay within our community, right? So we need water. And so then you can begin to think, okay, this is okay. You can use solar perhaps to generate water and maybe electricity as well, because if they have water and they don't have to go far, then they can start home and enjoy whatever electricity it is that you're bringing. And then their children can also then enjoy it, because their children will stop going far with them as well and stay at home and study more. So and then when it comes again to renewable, that's why I'm trying to connect it now again to renewables, because of course the truth of the matter is that Africa is rich in resources, both renewable and non-renewable. In South Africa, you have a lot of coal, and at the same time, you have a lot of load shedding. Yeah, so it's interesting that the interesting dynamics also in different other countries that are really not achieving their potentials because of lack of electricity, Nigeria included. So now it comes to the level of, okay, we have a lot of resources, both natural, both renewable and non-renewable. You have a goal to achieve energy access. This is the primary goal, to develop and to achieve energy access. So now it is now at the table of different African countries it's now at the table of different African countries themselves to find out for themselves what works where. So a country can sit down and map, you see renewable energies, particularly solar, would work well in this region because our grid has now reached here. Yet, therefore, investors who want to invest in renewable solar can come here, right? So this is how you take oh, we have wind potentials here. Investors who want wind can come here. So countries are taking the lead in terms of mapping out where investments can go in. See, that is the narrative. So it's not about just saying, you know what, we need that come in and that. This is what we have spent a lot of time, our company has spent a lot of time advising national governments in different countries, trying to help them come up with a country strategy that they can use to approach investors and say, you know what, and in order to get targeted as well. So, and then again, there's of course another question you want to ask me next is concerning renewable, non-renewable energy resources, which some countries are actually actively pursuing. Countries like Nigeria, for instance, Angola, and other countries actively developing their gas sector. Namibia in both hydrogen and oil and gas recently. Ghana has gone into oil and gas. Kenya has discovered gas as well. So now, would you tell them to halt and wait? The truth of the matter is that you need to put that in context, and that is in the context of development as well. Energy transition is a process, not a given. You need to check. Some people have argued, you know what, the revenue we get from this can go into that, and then so on and so forth. There's a lot, as I said, every country would have to have a solution that works best for them in the term, medium term, and long term, and they should be able to communicate it, and then only come up when they see within their own geographies that you know we're talking the same talk. So the company, oh, we're going to do only renewables, and then okay, fine, you can do only renewables. We've identified a place where you can do only renewables, and the country says do gas. Well, if there is potential for short-term gas or medium-term gas, why not? In order to solve huge energy deficit that exists. However, in places where renewable energies can compete favorably, I mean, subsidies should be done away with, so there could be a free market competition. In places where renewables can compete favorably with other forms of fuels, renewable energies should take a lead because of the and also thinking of cost, thinking of job creation, skill transfer, and things like that.
You know, you're talking basically here also of just about countries thinking about their energy mix. So we're thinking about energy, but we're also understanding energy in relation to the different countries, right? And so, for example, I know in South Africa, we have locations where solar energy is really more favorable. And also places where then coal is more favorable, also with supply chains and etc. But I think the conversation that you're adding on is the big conversation, particularly in Africa, that we've been having about around the energy mix and how fair is it that so there's this bigger conversation that the rest of the globe is saying, hey guys, we have an environmental disaster on our hand, and we would love to mitigate this through using renewable energy. And the conversation has been, the opposing conversation then has been, but you guys have, you've benefited from cheaper fossil fuel energy, and Africa is still in its development. So we understand that there's a global expectation, as kind of participants, but we also understand that we have a mandate to our civilians and the people that are on the grassroots levels, and which is essentially what you said, which is making sure that we have energy security. And the honesty is that has Africa arrived to that point where we can say we're energy secure? Because if you look at, there's that map that I really love that shows all the little dots, and the rest of the world is lit up, but you have Africa, and it's again, the dark continent. So I'd love also just your insight. You've slightly answered that question. We're talking about within Africa, countries need to look at what works for them, what energy adoption works for them. I'd love to kind of further that conversation. What do you think also then, so we have countries and what position they should take, but also Africa, what strategy do you think and believe as Africa we can also take within this global debate of transition?
Yeah, so we can offer what we can offer. One, of course, we have a lot of resources, and we have the option to go more of renewables, even in cases where it is relatively more costly, but we would need a backup financing for it, right? So if someone checks their systems, as I said, starting from the country level, right? So now they check their strategies and say, you know what, in this particular area, we have two options. One is solar and wind, another one is gas. We've checked the cost. Let's use an example. So solar and wind is 100 and gas is 80. And then normally the argument in the global stage would be, well, we want us to go more renewables. But an argument for the country involved, we say, you know what, going gas is cheaper for us, and so on and so forth. So that is where climate financing comes in, where development financing comes in to now cover the gap to say, you know what, okay, we can be able to provide 20% for you so that you can go solar and renewables, right? And it is going to be a good argument because, of course, the future is heading towards renewables. I'm just trying to give you a context. It's not a persuasion. It's not about having conferences and talking from morning till night and pushing campaign. It's about practicality. It has to come to the ground, right? And then make the decisions vis-a-vis limited budget and costs. Yeah, so I think this is just an example, and I think these are the things that we need to be talking about at the global stage as well. Things needs to be played in a more understanding way. I mean, we had a situation whereby, you know, I think energy security is key, and everyone understands it. This is also what was understood when Russia went to war, and then everyone suddenly began to understand what energy security meant. You know, people were willing to do anything possible to generate electricity first, and then think of what will happen tomorrow. So at least they got the taste of what the argument was. So it's not a good argument to say, you know what, this country is developed using fossil fuel, and why are they? It's not a good argument. It's a shallow argument because time flies and technologies develop, becomes better. A better argument is what is happening now. You have to check what is happening now, and then compare in terms of cost, reality, and other things, connection to economic development nexus, and then make a decision now, and then say, for now, we have looked at the technologies. These are the cost implications. These are the other spillover effects in the economy. We are going with this one, and not going in the political post-colonial theory of saying, you know what, you people development. I mean, some people use it, but it's not a very smart argument.
What is not not? Can you repeat that later?
I mean, like saying other people did it, why not allow us to do it as well? I think it's not a very good argument. I think a better argument is to say, you know what, we have to, because I think, as I just said, time differs, right? It could be at that time that was the best technology, but we are already at this time, right? So we should look a little bit more timely and more objective to say, now we have these technologies that we are comparing. We should compare with the technologies that are available right now, right? And so I think that's how I'm picturing it. So I'm just trying to give you some points that connecting what is happening at the national level to what is happening at the global level, right? So one has to come prepared with more arguments, more technical arguments. So I always tell you that it starts with the national government. It starts with the subnational government and the communities to say, in our community, we are pastoralists. We need more of this and that. Therefore, this particular kind of energy source suits us more, right? Or in a nation, or they can have a map. This area can do very well in solar. This area is more grid oriented. It may be more cost effective for us to do gas, unless we receive climate financing that helps us to do alternative. You see, so the argument becomes very clear. These are the arguments you can now take to the global level. It becomes clear to everyone, but it does not include stories like, you know, you people developed on this and that, and then therefore why are you stopping us? It's a very childish argument.
I hear that. And I often look at the landscape, right? And I'm like, there's a lot of back and forth, but there's not a lot of, which is exactly what you said, which is like the building on effective kind of what are other resources that are around? What do we have at our disposal? And we all understand that the goal is energy security. What do we have at our disposal? And for example, if we're looking at a rural community, that will then inform the kind of energy source that we use, and also take into consideration the finances, or the financing of that technology will also allow for us to kind of further kind of give explanation to why we're going about this way. But I love it because it's so practical, right? And I think that's really more of what we need, because looking at the scope, there's a lot of politics around the green space, or there's a lot of politics about the transition, and I believe that another. I'm very curious about, do we also believe what are the other tools, some of the other tools that we can think about that can also strengthen our positioning in terms of the energy transition? I would love to see it from the background of policy and possibly manufacturing. But I think we can start with manufacturing. And what have been your experiences with that in relation to the transition?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And it's a very good nexus, because we need to begin to produce things, right? This keeps our exchange rate balanced. If you, I mean, this is also an issue with Nigeria as we currently speak. So foreign revenues, if you really want to balance your exchange and balance of payments, you need to produce more locally. So on that note, yeah, it's very important to now connect energy transition to manufacturing. Quite all right. There are a lot of places where, let's say, installations for commercial use is good when you use renewables. That's just the truth. It's been proven, especially in areas where you want to have constant machine. You have to have your machine running constantly, right? And I've seen companies, we've actually seen companies choose solar, for instance, as opposed to grid electricity that comes from gas, because of non-stability, and you cannot really the supply, right? And because you cannot trust the supply, they had a situation whereby the machines were damaged because of one issue or the other with it. So they preferred to go with solar. So that's an example. So in some manufacturing activities, it may be very good to use renewable energy means. Okay. So now, when you're now going to heavy industries, I think Sasol produces steel, no? Yeah. Other countries that produces, heavy industries like steel, like other things. So you have a situation whereby you have to now check again which energy source would be better in order to achieve base load, which is quite important for industrial processes and also things like that.
Hi, can I just have 1 second? I'll be with you right now.
All right.
Hi. Thank you so much. Sorry, I had to change location quickly.
Okay.
But just in that conversation, right? So what we mainly have to look at is when we manufacture, it goes back to the same idea that you were talking about, that essentially manufacturing is going to help us, but also you need to take into consideration once more which location we're at. We can either go with solar, if it's suiting to the context, or gas. just switching to the context. So it brings us once more to the conversation of context. One of the things that you touched on, right, was how the war in some place, when we think of globalization, right, we think of this interconnectedness and how a lot of our industries and our economies were very dependent on how the relationships of us were together. But what we're seeing also is, as much as we are so integrated, our economies are so integrated, what happens in one part of the continent or in one part of the world is able to affect, another economy. Do you think that possibly another way of transitioning could be us then fostering for more local supply chains? Of just the technologies that we are using, and that would be suiting to the context. So, for example, take coal, for example. In South Africa, a lot of it needs to be transported all around or exported, etc. But if the local area where the coal is being mined, the focus area could just be on providing or using the coal to provide for that context. Do you think that with each location taking on the technology that would be best for that space and possibly manufacturing in it, so shortening the supply chain essentially, do you think that will also help us in terms of being more strategic in trying to accomplish energy security?
Yeah, I think, as I said, I mean, it's good to kind of check the resources that are available and then try to maximize their usage, right? So, I mean, there are also so many aspects to it. You use coal as an example. I mean, for it to be a just energy transition, I mean, there is one thing about energy transition. One thing is about energy transition. Another thing is to have it in a just way that makes it balanced for everyone who is taking part. So for it to kind of be a just transition, one has to also consider other factors like for those, for instance, as you used as the example of coal, what happens to the workers who are working in those coal fields, and how do you kind of capacitate them to get more involved in the new sector that is coming up? There has been, this kind of questions needs to come up. Also questions about negotiating well with communities. We've had situations whereby even renewable energy projects themselves were not adhering to certain important rules and regulations about social and environmental impact. And communities also rioting that they do not want renewable energy projects in their communities, simply because of maybe land acquisition issues or displacement. These are things that one has to also think of. Also, new technologies. One has to also keep their eyes on certain new technologies. One of them is also hydrogen, for instance, is also becoming more and more popular, especially for decarbonization. In terms of globalization as well, I think it's important. There's always been this debate of export or local use. There has to be a good balance between both. Of course, molecules that are costly or cannot be afforded locally can actually be exported in the meantime, and those ones that can be used within can actually be used if they're less costly. And also, new technologies like green hydrogen can actually be used to further energy transition, in the sense that you have renewable energy projects first before you then have utilizers that make this green hydrogen production possible. So some of those electricity generated from renewable energy sources can actually go for usage within the country, and so on and so forth.
Thank you so much for that. So, as much as globalization is important, but also taking into consideration once more the workers, the people that are within these communities that we're trying to provide energy security to is as equally as important. And that's been one of the big debates, right, about the transition being just, about how many jobs are going to be lost or potentially might be lost in the process if we don't transition in a way that's kind of aware of all the other complexities of what gets affected when we are trying to change our ways of generating energy. You touched a lot on the financial aspects and sometimes what are ways that in which we can limit the financial aspects of transitioning. There's often been this idea of kind of a second wave of colonization, for lack of a better word. So how do we think about, or how can also African countries, when going out and looking for financial funding for their renewable projects, also not fall into possibly the trap of kind of being exploited, and those financial institutions possibly also influencing political frameworks and etc. Is there a way that we can protect ourselves, or that Africans can protect themselves from it? Or is this even a conversation when we think about climate financing and green financing?
Now that is interesting. It's a conversation, but at the same time, this is also a place where I see the national governments playing more role, right? And the citizens playing also even a better role of holding the governments accountable. Everyone coming to play a role, NGOs, civil society groups, people like yourself. How do you achieve this? You achieve this by everyone has a role to play in this. Because there can be. I mean, we've seen situations whereby when a community actually sees, okay, fine, this project does not suit us, they actually organize a riot, a peaceful riot, and make their case known that we do not want this, that these are the conditions we want before this project can be on the ground here. And this often comes from a situation whereby they are informed and sensitized by NGOs and knowledgeable people to tell them, okay, these are the things that you're going to really lose if you do this or that. So they are informed. So that's community level now. So I'm trying to remove the stress away from the higher levels now, just to let people at the at other levels know that they can also play a role in this. Industries can play a role in this. Communities can play a role in this. National governments can then also play a role in terms of tightening their strategies, not falling into corruption, making sure that the institutions are very strong to say, yes, this is what we believe in and we must stick to it. And then the citizenry is also making sure that everything is obeyed to the letter, or they will make their concerns known publicly. So these are the things, there should be just checks and balances to avoid. So of course, countries that has healthy amount of bureaucracy, it will be difficult to come to it gets to exploitation. So this excuse of exploitation can be removed if everyone just does what they need to do, becomes more serious, and implement the laws, and the citizens also holding the national governments accountable, the communities where these projects are happening also doing their own best to say yes or no without fear or favor. And with all of these things combined, I think that we would avoid this situation. But I think that increasingly in the recent years, we've been seeing a lot of interests and of many developed countries also expressing their desire to have a smooth eye-to-eye discussion when it comes to energy transition, and not to impose or things called colonialism or like that. I think with all of these things in place, so the willingness not to do those things, and then the frameworks and the strategies implemented by the national government to avoid it, and then the communities themselves being enlightened to make sure that they know their rights and the things they can do or not do, and then NGOs playing a role, private companies playing a role. So everyone's hand needs to be on deck.
I love this, because what we're essentially talking about is collaboration, right? Everyone needs everyone to be held accountable, essentially, as much as government institutions help create the kind of framework that we need to make sure that the rest of the people at the grassroots level don't get affected, but also those people, the communities, are just equally as vital to the conversation to make sure that they're also holding these government institutions accountable, which is a big thing that we also have in Africa. We know, we have our problem of corruption and etc. I think how carrying on with that conversation about everyone needs to be held accountable, and this is everyone's problem, not just a certain particular institution, right? Can also we talk about within this transition, also making sure that we have good policies, right? And for example, South Africa is known as for drafting out one of the best policies, in the whole world. But a lot of the things that we struggle with and that we've seen a lack of is the implementation of those policies, right? So we understand that even if you can have really great policies, but if you don't implement those policies, and also if you don't regulate those policies, in the long term run, it can be quite detrimental. So what would your take be on with how have you seen the value of good policies within Africa working or helping us within the transition, and where have you also seen the limitations of policy within us trying to transition?
Yeah, at some point, policies has to go from being policy to being to drafting specific roadmaps to achieve them and being realistic. Yeah, so some policies should not be copied from other places. It should be it should be very specific to a particular. It goes back to context, and then following that, there has to be a roadmap on how to achieve it, and then the sharing of responsibilities on who has to do what and how, when. When is a very good point, right? When, so that to avoid this whole waste of time. And then all these things are, when they come together, are important because it helps us to now get to the stage whereby we can then truly say that we are getting there, right? We can, at the same time, it requires also at the same time collaboration between all stakeholders and accountability to say, yeah, we have seen this document, you promised this and that. And those policies should go, or strategies should go into roadmaps. And when those roadmaps come up, everyone should be able to be holding the responsible parties accountable to say, okay, we signed the roadmap that this and this is supposed to be implemented by 2025. Why are we still here? So it's to have those conversations. Definitely having more private investments are welcome. Yeah, so having more private investments are welcome. So we need to also have more policies to stimulate or to make it more comfortable for private sectors like ourselves to actually be more in the game. And one thing that we do very well because of where we're situated, we work quite closely with both the public and private sector at the same time. Because of our consulting role as well, we've had in our portfolio several governments and development financial institutions, and at the same time, we've also advised private sector. And so we're able to kind of balance and know who needs what and why they need that. So I think it's a very important thing, having those kind of, more holistic view on what is required by both sectors is important.
Thank you so much for that. I think I would also just love to share or shed more light on just what you do at Integrated Africa, just to, with all these different kind of conversations that we've been going to surrounding policy, communities, localization, and just the whole robust conversation that you have. How do you see Integrated Fit Africa kind of fitting into this whole, or how do you see it being a collaborator within this transition of Africa? This
Yeah,
energy transition.
yeah. So Integrated Africa Power, for short, IAP. We all the things I've just discussed are the things that we always often engage ourselves in, and we at delivering these, we actually have about two broad arms, right? So one arm is the research and consulting arm, where we conduct quite a number of research and studies, feasibility studies, market entry studies, and come up with really useful research that we either share in public or we just prepare for organizations, specific organizations under NDAs. And then, of course, we also do consultations Yeah, we do consulting to put public and private sector, government and international development financial institutions, private sector developers and things like this. So we do research and consulting, more broadly speaking. But then at another hand of our activities has to do with facilitating investments in projects. So we are able to kind of look at a project, help bring that project proposal into a financing stage, and help get the financing for the project. And oftentimes we become also maybe shareholders if we want to, and so on and so forth. And then closer to that, we also have projects on the ground that we're actually personally developing. And we're doing it because coming from the things we've learned in the past, advising different sectors, we're now trying to put up some model projects, if you like, in the different sectors. As I mentioned to you, we're currently getting a mini grid project off the ground, and we're trying to test out this whole nexus connection of energy projects and productivity use of projects, because we're trying to do it in a very, very comprehensive manner that makes sure that it goes into water generation and supply, goes into affecting schools and hospitals and things we've just talked about, enhancing businesses and processing. And then we want to see how, as an example, how a project can actually transform a community. That's what we're going to prove. We're on it. We're going to get it done. Other than that, we're going to get it done this year. Other than that, we also handle a number of green hydrogen projects. We're going to produce green hydrogen molecules in the form of ammonia or methanol. We're going to do it. Yeah, so we're going to do it. Yeah, so these are the things. That we do have our hands in, and all these things are to prove that yes, we are there to support Africa, and we're also very open to collaborate with sectors and countries. That's one of our key principles: cross-border cooperation. So we have an African regional outlook, but we also understand the differences within different nations. And we are also willing to engage in international partnerships with countries in Europe or United States, and to make sure that we are collaboration. I mean, we want to collaborate, but at the same time at a level that is good for everyone, and there are no casualties. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the work that you guys are doing is phenomenal because it touches on what we were really talking about, which is to say, if you're really going to try and solve of energy security, you need to understand the context, right? And I believe that with your research, that's really where, and the feasibility studies, and that's why you've really been driving home, going into the specific, whether it's the community or the country, and understanding what are the resources that the country or the community have at their disposal, and then how can you use those to make sure that you also using then the best solution, right? The best energy solution. And I think also the different things that you've been talking about is not just one kind of energy technology that is kind of above all, but it's allow them to compete and to all see once more for which context that technology is suited for. So I really want to thank you for your insights today. They've been so valuable. I've learned so much, but I also just want to thank you for what you guys do at Integrated Africa Power. It's really beautiful because we begin to understand the solutions and making sure that the solutions are fitting to the context. Um, and that's really what we need more of, right? You also talked about leadership, also making sure that we have leadership that we can hold accountable, but then leadership is a two-way process. It's the people that are led, but it's also the leadership as well. And that's how we make sure that we keep it filled with integrity. So I really want to thank you. I've learned so much today, and I'm sure that everyone on the call has so much questions as well. I would love to open up the floor, though, just for one question that maybe someone would love to ask you. Just one question. So I'd love to, at this point in time, open up the floor to one question that you might have for Chugozi before we really close up and wrap up. So yes, you can just lift up your hand, and I think you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Is there anyone that has a question? Okay, we don't seem to have a question right now, but I do have a question. I do have a question, and it's just a small game. It's a small game. I just really want to put you on the hot seat quickly. So I'm going to just say one word, and you have to let me know. You have to give me a word that comes to mind when I say that word. Is that
Okay.
cool?
Interesting.
Okay.
Just one
So,
time, right? Yeah.
yeah, 3 times. I'm going to put you on the hot seat 3 times. I promise you won't, but it won't be anything hectic. You have to give me one word, though. I'm going to give you a phrase. So here we go. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Shifting to renewables.
Impact.
Ah, renewable technologies.
Cheap.
Chivo. One that I'm energy security.
Governance.
Yay!
Yeah.
I like that one. Renewable energy cheap. I like that.
Affordable. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, thank.
Affordable.
Yeah, it's been really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much.
And
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you. And I'll ask you to keep it up. And also thanks to your team as well.
Awesome stuff. Thank you
Okay.
so much for joining us today. We are so honored and privileged to have you here today, and just your insight, and your objectiveness about how we can go about the approach and really taking politics out of it, and really narrowing it down to what do we need and moving from the what do we need. Okay, we do have to have is that a question, Chima?
Yes, it is.
Okay, you can go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much for this section. I want to ask, when we talk about renewables, we most times don't talk about the areas that are supposed to be talked about. Like we always talk about solar, maybe because it's what is very, very obtainable. But I want to ask, like in a community where we have abundant sun, and then we also have abundance of livestock and cattle dung, and also in the place you see women struggle to their food. They go far distances to get firewood, uh, and there is no electricity for them to tap in and then cook from the electricity. Also, the price of gas here in Nigeria is also expensive. And then this biogas technology, I want to believe is a renewable source. So I'm like asking if it could be talked about the more, and then people should be like sensitized on how to really go about. Like you talked about utilizing what is available, having the context of the community at heart whenever you are solving or talking about renewables. So, like using biogas to aid cooking, I think should be a topic that should be talked about often and on, because in most of the villages there are abundance of these bio waste. It could be converted and it could be used in homes, supporting cooking or assisting in any way. So, if you could be kind to really shed light to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chima.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. I think, of course, I use examples that I thought maybe people could be familiar with, but of course, renewable energy goes beyond that to include so many other aspects, as you know. So it includes biomass and bioenergy. And of course, as I said, when you go to a community, you see what is more feasible there, right? And what can it be used? It's true that energy from biomass or biogas can be used for cooking. And if that is the case, then investment should go into that particular one, particularly, and then weighing in the pros and cons, and so on and so forth. So Renewable energies consist of, both solar, both wind, both thermal, both biomass, biogas, and so many hydro, small hydros, large hydros. These things are important to consider context. Which one is cheaper? Which one is more affordable? Which is in the end? That's very important as well. You don't want to do something costly. If biogas prices are also cheap most as you just talked about, it's more cost effective. It makes more sense that one goes into it, right? So those kind of things are the things that we are kind of thinking of and want to promote that people keep in mind, not just at the national level, but also at the community level. Should be that when investors come to a particular community, that the community leader says, you know what, in this community we do this and that, and we suggest this and that. So that sensitization is important as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chigozie. We're quite all right, guys, thank you so much once more for joining us today. We've had a full-blown hour of really understanding what's happening, how to navigate well in the energy. So I'd love to thank you from us, Energy Just. This is our second webinar, and so excited to bring you so much more. We will be putting this on our YouTube channel, and we'll be putting it on the page as we uploaded it. But it was your time. Thank you so much. And yeah, till we meet again, guys. Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.